In November 2001, Nick Wells and I traveled from London, Ontario to Cambridge, Massachusetts to film an interview with John Kenneth Galbraith. Nick wanted to talk to Professor Galbraith about his family history in southwestern Ontario, but their conversation also ended up being a discussion about some of the events in Professor Galbraith's political and academic career, as well as some more personal recollections. Here are some excerpts from their conversation.
Mr. Galbraith, I want to ask you, when did your direct ancestors come to southwestern Ontario?
Well, I was afraid you would ask me that. I don't have an exact date.
All right.
But it was very early in the 1800s.
And why southwestern Ontario? Why didn't they go to Glengarry, Kingston area?
Oh, the same answer. That was where land was available.
Yes, but
some of it free and some of it in payment to Colonel Talbot.
Correct.
The Talbot estate, and it was on the whole better land than possibly than anywhere else in Canada. Wonderfully deep, stone-free or largely stone-free, fertile stretches of land, handicapped only by a heavy covering of trees.
Can your ancestors remember that, the heavy covering of trees, and did they tell stories about that?
One of my grandfathers, my father's grandfather, my great-grandfather, in the process of recovering the land from the trees, had one fall on him and died.
Ah.
That was the most prominent recollection in the family.
Besides being discriminated against by Colonel Talbot, was there any other discrimination faced by your family in the area?
Well, the discrimination involving Colonel Talbot, I think, has been largely invented after the fact. Mm-hmm. It rested on mostly on one thing, that he granted the land, granted from his land grant, his huge land grant in southwestern Ontario, a free contribution, in our case of 50 acres, with another 50 to be bought. And the discontent with Colonel Talbot was partly the big house he had, partly the lovely location he had at Port Talbot, as it was called, but partly on the price he asked for that other 50 acres, which might have been, you know, some enormous price, like 50 cents an acre.
Yes. Do you know if your ancestors came to southwestern Ontario speaking any Gaelic or any other language besides English?
I think that in my case, my family's case, English went back to the time of settlement. Right. But there were many families that came speaking Gaelic. And there were some, even in my time, so committed to their history that they taught their family, their children, Gaelic.
How did the people in the neighborhood feel about them speaking their traditional language?
Oh, it was purely, wholly tolerated, but probably a feeling that they were lending a little too much attention to their origins. It was thought to be a good-natured but slightly primitive form of education.
Can you remember any other ethnic groups in your area where your family settled? Were there any black families? Were there any Native families?
Not to speak of, other than, of course, the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. One part of my clan in latter years settled in Dresden, and Dresden was close to or some part of the Underground Railway from the United States. And visiting a relative there, I was always shocked to have as one of my playmates someone who was black. It was a surprise that I was hardly prepared for.
What do you remember about southwestern Ontario before you left? Before you even left to go off to college? Can you remember what it was like in that part of the world?
Well, yes. It was a peaceful, farm-oriented community. The farms were Scottish. The towns, Dutton, Wallistown, and so forth, were English. There was a certain amount of tension, as always, between the townspeople and the farmers. Tension that didn't preclude friendship or anything of that sort, but was based on the fact that the farmers worked hard to make money and then paid quite a bit of it to the townspeople for things they need on which to live. I don't want to exaggerate that, and I stress that. There was a sense of difference rather than any real tension. I never knew any real community tension.
Did you notice any tension in politics? Did one particular group lean towards one particular party?
Oh, sure. The farmers were liberals, and in the years immediately following World War I, were strongly given to the UFO, the United Farmers of Ontario. And the townspeople were considered to be intellectually somewhat backward and therefore Tories.
With the United Farmers, anybody in your family a member of that party at that time? Was politics talked about in your family around the table?
Constantly.
Can you remember any political discussions?
In the United States, my father would have been called a political boss. He was the permanent head of the Liberal Party in that part of Elgin County. And that position was rather taken for granted. And he was the person that candidates came first to see, and where he made his selection as to who he backed. And the first political meetings I ever attended were with my father on behalf of one or another of his candidates.
What were political meetings like? Can you remember your first political meeting?
Well, I remember the most distinguished.
Yes.
It was, a favorite meeting was at farm auctions, because that brought farmers together. And the auctioneer would always give a little time. And there was one wonderful occasion when my father got up on the manure pile to make the political speech and apologized profusely for speaking from the Tory platform. The story is not original with him. I've heard it in other contexts. It just was something that had happened more than once.
How large a land holding did your family have?
150 acres.
150 acres. Did that go to the oldest son in the family, and was that considered?
Well, let me give a little history there.
Okay.
It's my impression, although it should be checked, that 50 of those acres came from Colonel Talbot, that 50 were purchased, and then another 50 were bought in my own time, up the road a bit. Okay. It was known as the 50.
And it would have gone to the oldest son in the family? Was that the tradition?
Well, that would have been the tradition. But by the time my father died, the oldest son had disappeared from sight to California. That was me.
That was you. Okay. Tell us something about why you chose not a farming career, but yet you went to an agricultural college that became a university.
We're out for blood and thunder, boys. We're farmers on a spree, were taking 4-year courses at the famous OAC. Put on your old red and blue sweater, for there isn't any better, and we'll open up another keg of beer, for it was not for knowledge that we came to this college, but to raise hell all the year. How's that?
Great.
Well, I was asked that question when I was up to Ottawa with my wife some 2 or 3 years ago to get an OC.
An order.
I'm one of the 2 or 3 non-Canadian citizens ever to have received an Order of Canada. I was a very proud day. I enjoyed it very much. I put a look of false modesty on my face for several hours. And at the press conference, when the Governor General had finished, I was prepared for the first question, which was yours. Mm-hmm. Why, Professor Galbraith, did you leave Canada for the United States? And my answer, which was not spontaneous, I thought of it in advance, was, well, in 1931, when I graduated from college in Canada, I had the choice between grim, hard work on an Ontario farm and a leisurely academic existence at the University of California. And I do not think there is anybody in this press corps that would have made a different decision. And they got up and clapped.
The weather is much better in California. Tell us about some of the relationships in your family with some of your neighbors. How did neighbors help each other in those years after the First World War?
Oh, there was a very well-organized system of cooperation for thrashing, silo filling, and if some other special job had to be done. Or if a family, which was a rare occasion, had to be away, neighbors would do the chores and look after the livestock. That was exceptional, but was still possible. There was a strong cooperative relationship between farmers, between neighboring farmers.